I rushed through heavy rain for 2 hours because he said he'd been in an accident. When I finally arrived soaked, he laughed with his friends. See, she still obeys me like a loyal dog. I just nodded. The next morning, my phone showed 50 missed calls. It was pouring. The kind of cold, relentless rain that soaks through your bones and makes every breath feel heavy. I was running, no umbrella, no jacket, just a shaking phone in my hand, and his message burned into my brain. Babe, I crashed my car. Please, I need you. I didn't think. I didn't even ask where. I just ran. 2 hours. 2 hours through flooded streets, past strangers staring at me like I'd lost my mind. My shoes squelched with every step. My clothes stuck to my skin. And my heart was hammering because the only thing I could think about was him lying somewhere hurt. But when I finally saw him, standing under a neon sign, perfectly fine, laughing with his friends, he didn't look surprised. He didn't even look guilty. He just smirked, turned to them, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "See? I told you." She'd come running like a loyal little dog, and I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, dripping wet, and nodded. The next morning, my phone lit up with 50 missed calls from him. I'm 26, working as an accountant, living alone in a small apartment a few hours away from my family. He's a few years older than me. A small business owner, or at least that's what he liked to call himself. When we first met, he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, confident, the kind of man who always had a plan. He talked about his projects, about how hard he worked, how tired he was of people who didn't believe in him. I fell for that. For the way he made me feel like I was the only one who did believe. In the beginning, he made me feel seen, protected, important. He would text me constantly, check in on me, make jokes about how no one else gets me like you do. But a few months in, little things started to change. He began testing me, as he called it. He'd disappear for hours or even days, then come back with a small smile and ask, "Did you miss me?" If I said yes, he'd laugh. If I said no, he'd accuse me of not caring. Once he told me, "If you really love someone, you should understand them without asking questions." At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now I know it was control. About a year ago, he said he'd lost money in an investment. He sounded broken that night. I remember sitting beside him, holding his hand as he stared at the floor. "I just need a little time," he said quietly. "I can fix this." He didn't ask for money, not directly. But when rent came around and he said he was short this month, I offered to help. Just for a while, I told myself. But a while turned into 6 months. I covered rent, groceries, small things he'd forgotten. When I hesitated, he'd look at me with that disappointed expression, like I'd failed him somehow. "You don't trust me?" he'd ask. "Of course I do," I'd say, because I did. I wanted to. He always promised he'd pay me back when things got better. But the thing about promises is, they start to mean less the more they're repeated. Sometimes I'd look at him sleeping on my couch in the middle of the day, wondering how he could rest so easily while I was exhausted from work. But every time that thought crept in, I'd push it away. He's just struggling, I told myself. Everyone goes through hard times. That's what love is, being there when things get rough. He started going out more, said it was for business, but sometimes he wouldn't come home until morning. When I asked where he'd been, he'd sigh like I was nagging him. "You always think the worst of me," he'd say. "Why can't you just be supportive?" And so I stopped asking. He didn't yell, he didn't hit, he didn't do anything obvious. His cruelty was quieter, the kind that makes you doubt your own sanity. I remember one night when I cried after another argument, and he said calmly, "You need to learn to control your emotions. No man wants a woman who falls apart over nothing." Over nothing. That phrase stuck with me, because everything that mattered to me had slowly become nothing to him. Still, I stayed. I told myself love was about patience, that someday when things got better, he'd remember how much I stood by him. 3 years together. 3 years of hoping, explaining, forgiving. And when our 3rd anniversary came around, he promised he'd make it special. He said he had a surprise. I got dressed up, even booked a dinner reservation at a nice restaurant I couldn't really afford. He texted me 20 minutes late, running behind. "Wait for me," I waited. 30 more minutes. Then another message. Almost there, outside, rain started to fall. The restaurant lights blurred through the window, and I watched couples laughing, eating, living. An hour passed. Then 2. And just when I thought maybe something had happened to him, my phone buzzed again. I got into an accident. Can you come? I froze. All the anger I'd felt a moment ago vanished. All I could think about was him, hurt, alone, maybe bleeding somewhere. I grabbed my bag and ran. I didn't stop to think, not even when my taxi couldn't get through the flooded streets and I had to walk the last few blocks in the rain. Every puddle soaked my shoes, every gust of wind cut through my clothes, but it didn't matter. He needed me. At least that's what I thought. That night would be the first time I learned what it really means when someone says, "Love makes you blind," because by the time I reached him, I wasn't saving anyone. I was walking straight into the moment that would finally open my eyes. When I finally reached the street, he mentioned, the rain hadn't stopped for a second. It felt endless, like the world itself wanted to keep me from finding him. My shoes were soaked through, my clothes heavy against my skin, and every breath I took came out as a shiver. I looked around for signs of an accident, broken glass, flashing lights, anything. There was nothing, only the faint glow of a cafe sign cutting through the rain, and that's when I saw him. Standing there, perfectly fine, laughing, surrounded by his friends, all of them dry, all of them comfortable, as if the night was theirs alone. For a moment, I froze. My brain couldn't even process it. He turned his head, saw me standing there, and didn't even look surprised. No guilt, no concern, just that same familiar smirk that used to make me feel special, but now felt like a knife. "You came," he said almost casually, like he'd just been waiting for me to show up to a dinner, not a fake emergency. I stared at him, breathing hard, the words catching in my throat. "You said you had an accident," I finally managed to say. He just shrugged, light as air. "Yeah," he said. "I just wanted to see if you'd actually come." For a second, I thought I misheard him. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe I was losing my mind. But then one of his friends laughed and slapped him on the shoulder. "Man, I told you she'd come," the guy said, grinning. "You owe me $20. That's when I realized what was happening. It was a bet. A test, a game. He turned back to his friends and said, loud enough for the whole street to hear, "See? I told you." She'd come running like a loyal little dog. Always does. The laughter that followed felt louder than the storm. Sharp, ugly, echoing off the wet pavement. I just stood there, rain running down my face, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at him. The man I thought I loved, and realized that he was enjoying this. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't even pretending to be sorry. He was proud. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound intimate, like we were still the same couple from before. "Come on," he said. "Don't look so serious. It was a joke." That word again, joke. He always used it when he crossed a line. Every cruel thing he said, every manipulation, every test, it was all just a joke. I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. He sighed, irritated now, as if I were the one ruining the moment. "God, you're so sensitive," he muttered. "No wonder I can't bring you around more often." That sentence hit harder than the rest. It was like watching someone casually throw away everything you thought was real. Because even then, even after everything, a part of me still hoped that maybe he'd realize what he'd done. That maybe he'd see me, really see me, standing there in the rain. But he didn't. He just smirked again, waiting for me to break, and something inside me went completely quiet. Not angry, not sad, just quiet. I looked at him one last time and said softly, "You're right." He frowned, confused. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing." "You're right." Then I turned around and started walking away. I could still hear them laughing behind me, the sound mixing with the rain, fading the farther I got. Every step felt heavy, but at the same time lighter than it had in months. When I reached home, I peeled off my soaked clothes, dropped them in a pile, and sat on the bathroom floor. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mind replayed every word, every look, every cruel thing he'd said that I had once brushed off as stress or a joke. It was all there, finally making sense. I'd spent years defending him, paying his rent when he said he couldn't, believing in him when even he didn't believe in himself. I told myself I was being loyal, supportive, loving, but now I realized I was just someone he trained to stay, no matter what he did. My phone buzzed on the counter. His name again and again. I didn't answer. He sent messages. "You're overreacting." It was just a joke. Come on, babe, answer me. Then finally, fine, be like that. I didn't even feel anger, just relief. Pure, heavy, liberating silence. I turned the phone face down and went to bed. For the first time in 3 years, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up early. The rain had stopped. The world looked clean again, washed out and quiet. I made coffee, sat by the window and stared outside for a long time. And that's when it hit me. The truth wasn't painful anymore. It was simple. He never loved me. Not really. He loved control. He loved seeing how far he could push before I'd finally stop coming back. And that morning I decided to stop. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, dripping water onto the floor, staring at the space we shared. The couch, the empty mugs, his jacket hanging by the door. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't anymore. Something inside me had broken, quietly, completely. And once it did, the rest of me just stopped caring. I walked into the bedroom and started packing his things. Slowly, calmly, every shirt, every pair of shoes, every piece of himself that he'd left scattered around like his presence mattered more than mine. I folded them neatly, not out of kindness, but because I wanted the end to be clean. No shouting, no messy scenes, just an ending, the kind of ending he wouldn't see coming, because men like him never imagine you'll actually walk away. His voice messages kept coming as I moved around the apartment. Hey, where are you? Don't be mad. Then you know I didn't mean it like that. And later, come on, baby, talk to me. Don't make this a big deal. I didn't respond. I let his voice play in the background like static. Meaningless noise I'd listened to for too long. By midnight, all his things were in bags. I tied each one tightly, dragged them downstairs and placed them by the dumpster behind the building. The same place where he once refused to park because he said it smelled like failure. It made me smile a little. Just a tiny, bitter curve of my lips, not out of joy, but peace. When I got back inside, I changed into dry clothes, sat on the couch and texted him one last time. You were right, I wrote. I am the loyal dog you said I was. But tonight, she finally learned how to walk away from her owner. Then I blocked his number. No anger, no trembling hands, just silence. That night I slept deeper than I had in years. No nightmares, no checking my phone every few minutes, no wondering where he was or who he was with. Just silence and the soft sound of rain outside the window. In the morning, sunlight came through the blinds. My phone was lighting up again, flashing over and over. 50 missed calls, dozens of messages. Please pick up. I'm sorry, okay? Let's talk. I didn't mean it. And finally, you're ruining everything over a stupid joke. I read every word. I didn't reply to a single one. I deleted them all one by one until the screen was empty again. Clean, like I wanted my life to be. Later that day, I took out the trash, walked past the dumpster, and saw the truck had already come. His things were gone. Just like he was, or rather like I'd decided he would be. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not happy, not triumphant, just free. I didn't win. There was no victory here. But I was done playing his game. Done begging for respect from someone who used love as a leash. I sat by the window again, sipping cold coffee, listening to the quiet hum of the world moving on without him. And that quiet. It felt like the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The morning after felt strange. Not sad, not empty. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that sits deep in your chest and hums. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up checking my phone. I didn't rehearse how to say sorry for something that wasn't my fault. I just stood there in the kitchen, hair still damp from my shower, coffee steaming in my hands, and realized this was what peace felt like. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just stillness.